Roald Dahl's revolting rhyme.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When little Snow White's mother died, the king, her father, up and cried,
"Oh, what a nuisance, what a life! Now I must find another wife."
It's never easy for a king to find himself that sort of thing. He wrote to every magazine and said,
"I'm looking for a queen."
At least 10,000 girls replied and begged to be the royal bride. The king said with a shifty smile,
"I'd like to give each one a trial."
However, in the end, he chose a lady called Miss Maclehose, who brought along a curious toy that seemed to give her endless joy. This was a mirror framed in brass, a magic, talking, looking glass. Ask it something day or night, it always got the answer right. For instance, if you were to say, "Oh, mirror, what's for lunch today?" the thing would answer in a trice,
"Today it's scrambled eggs and rice."
Now, every day, week in, week out, the spoiled and stupid queen would shout, "Oh, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered every time,
"Oh, madam, you're the queen sublime. You are the only one to charm us. Queen, you are the cat's pyjamas."
For 10 whole years the silly queen repeated this absurd routine. Then suddenly, one awful day, she heard the magic mirror say,
"From now on, Queen, you're number 2. Snow White is prettier than you."
The queen went absolutely wild. She yelled, "I'm going to scrag that child! I'll cook her flaming goose! I'll skin her! I'll have her rotten guts for dinner!" She called the huntsman to her study. She shouted at him, "Listen, buddy, you drag that filthy girl outside and see you take her for a ride. Thereafter slit her ribs apart and bring me back her bleeding heart." The huntsman dragged the lovely child deep, deep into the forest wild. Fearing the worst, poor Snow White spake. She cried, "Oh, please give me a break." The knife was poised, the arm was strong. She cried again, "I done you wrong." The huntsman's heart began to flutter. It melted like a pound of butter. He murmured,
"Okay, beat it, kid."
And you can bet your life she did. Later, the huntsman made a stop within the local butcher's shop, and there he bought, for safety's sake, a bullock's heart and one nice steak.
"Oh, Majesty, oh, Queen,"
He cried,
"that rotten little girl has died, and just to prove I didn't cheat, I brought along these bits of meat."
The Queen cried out, "Bravissimo! I trust you killed her nice and slow." Then, this is the disgusting part, the Queen sat down and ate the heart. I only hope she cooked it well. Boiled heart can be as tough as hell. While all of this was going on, oh where had Snow White gone? She'd found it easy, being pretty, to hitch a ride into the city, and there she'd got a job unpaid as general cook and parlour-maid with 7 funny little men, each one not more than 3'10", ex-horse-race jockeys, all of them. These 7 dwarfs, though awfully nice, were guilty of one shocking vice. They squandered all of their resources at the racetrack backing horses. When they hadn't backed a winner, none of them got any dinner. One evening, Snow White said, "Look here, I think I've got a great idea. Just leave it all to me, okay? And no more gambling till I say." That very night, at eventide, young Snow White hitched another ride, and then, when it was very late, she slipped in through the palace gate. The king was in his counting-house, counting out his money. The queen was in the parlour, eating bread and honey. The footman and the servants slept, so no one saw her as she crept on tiptoe through the mighty hall and grabbed the mirror off the wall. As soon as she had got it home, she told the senior dwarf, or gnome, to ask it what he wished to know. "Go on," she shouted, "have a go." He said,
"Oh, mirror, please don't joke. Each one of us is stony broke. Which horse will win tomorrow's race, the Ascot Gold Cup steeplechase?"
The mirror whispered sweet and low,
"The horse's name is Mistletoe."
The dwarfs went absolutely daft. They kissed young Snow White fore and aft, then rushed away to raise some dough with which to back old Mistletoe. They pawned their watches, sold the car, they borrowed money near and far. For much of it they had to thank the manager of Barclays Bank. They went to Ascot, and of course for once they backed the winning horse. Thereafter, every single day, the mirror made the bookies pay. Each dwarf and Snow White got a share, and each was soon a millionaire, which shows that gambling's not a sin, provided that you always win.
The Toad and the Snail. I really am most awfully fond of playing in the lily pond. I take off shoes and socks and coat and paddle with my little boat. Now, yesterday, quite suddenly, a giant toad came up to me. This toad was easily as big as any fair-sized fattish pig. He smiled and said, "How do you do?" "Hello, good morning, how are you?" His face somehow reminded me of Mummy's sister Emily. The toad said, "Don't you think I'm fine? Admire these lovely legs of mine, and I am sure you've never seen a toad so gloriously green." I said, "So far as I can see, you look just like Aunt Emily." He said, "I bet Aunt Emily can't jump one half as high as me. Hop on my back, young friend," he cried. "I'll take you for a marvellous ride." As I got on, I thought, oh, blimey, oh, dearie me, how wet and slimy. "Sit further back," he said. "That's right. I'm going to jump, so hold on tight." He jumped. Oh, how he jumped. By gum, I thought my final hour had come. My wretched eardrums popped and fizzed. My eyeballs watered. Up we whizzed. I clung on tight. I shouted, "How much further are we going now?" Toad said, his face all wreathed in smiles, "With every jump, it's 50 miles." Quite literally, we jumped all over from Scotland to the cliffs of Dover. Above the cliffs, we stopped for tea, and Toad said, gazing at the sea, "What do you say we take a chance and jump from England into France?" I said, "Oh dear, do you think we ought to? I'd hate to finish in the water." But toads, you'll find, don't give a wink for what we little children think. He didn't bother to reply. He jumped. You should have seen us fly. We simply soared across the sea, the marvellous Mr. Toad and me. Then down we came, and down, and landed in a funny town. We landed hard, in fact we bounced. "We're there, it's France," the Toad announced. He said, "You must admit it's grand to jump into a foreign land. No boats, no bicycles, no trains, no cars, no noisy aeroplanes." Just then we heard a fearful shout. "Oh, heavens above," the Toad cried out. I turned and saw a frightening sight. On every side, to left, to right, people were running down the road, running at me and Mr. Toad. And every person, man and wife, was brandishing a carving knife. It didn't take me very long to figure there was something wrong. And yet how could a small boy know, for nobody had told me so, that Frenchmen aren't like you or me. They do things very differently. They won't say yards, they call them meters. And they're the most peculiar eaters. A Frenchman frequently regales himself with half a dozen snails. The greedy ones will gulp a score of these foul brutes and ask for more. In many of the best hotels, the people also eat the shells. Imagine that. My stomach turns. One might as well eat slugs or worms. But wait. Read on a little bit. You haven't heard the half of it. These French go even more agog if someone offers them a frog. You'd better fetch a basin quick in case you're going to be sick. The bits of frog they like to eat are thighs and calves and toes and feet. The French will gobble loads and loads of legs they chop off frogs and toads. They think it's absolutely ripping to guzzle frogs' legs fried in dripping. That's why the whole town and their wives were rushing us with carving knives. They screamed in French, "Well, I'll be blowed. What legs there are upon that toad. Chop them, skin them, cook them, fry them. All of us are going to try them." "Toad," I cried, "I'm not a funk, but ought we not to do a bunk? These rascals haven't come to greet you. All they want to do is eat you." Toad turned his head and looked at me and said, as cool could be, "Calm down and listen carefully, please. I often come to France to tease these crazy French who long to eat my lovely tender froggy meat. I am a magic toad," he cried, "and I don't ever have to hide. Stay where you are. Don't move," he said. and pressed a button on his head. At once there came a blinding flash, and then the most almighty crash, and sparks were bursting all around, and smoke was rising from the ground. When all the smoke had cleared away, the Frenchmen, with their knives, cried, "Hey, where is the toad? Where has he gone?" You see, I now was sitting on a wonderfully enormous snail. His shell was smooth and brown and pale, and I was so high off the ground that I could see for miles around. The snail said, "Hello, greetings, hail, I was a toad, now I'm a snail." I had to change the way I looked to save myself from being cooked. "Oh, snail," I said, "I'm not so sure. I think they're starting up once more." The French were shouting, "What a snail! Oh, what a monster! What a whale! He makes the toad look teachy small. There's lovely snail meat for us all. We'll bake the creature in his shell and ring aloud the dinner bell. Get garlic, parsley, butter, spices. We'll cut him into 50 slices. Come sharpen up your carving knives. This is the banquet of our lives." I murmured through my quivering lips, "Oh, snail, I think we've had our chips." The snail replied, "I disagree. These greedy French, they'll not eat me." But on they came. They screamed, "Yahoo! Surround the brute and run him through!" Good gracious, I could almost feel the pointed blades, the shining steel. But Snail was cool as cool could be. He turned his head and winked at me, and murmured, "Au revoir, farewell," and pulled a lever on his shell. I looked around. The snail had gone. And now who was I sitting on? Oh, what relief, what joy, because at last I'd found a friend. It was the gorgeous, glamorous, absurd, enchanting roly-poly bird. He turned and whispered in my ear, "Well, fancy seeing you, my dear." Then up he went in glorious flight. I clutched his neck and hung on tight. We fairly raced across the sky, the roly-poly bird and I, and landed safely just beyond the fringes of the lily pond. When I got home, I never told a solitary single soul what I had done or where I'd been or any of the things I'd seen. I did not even say I rode upon a giant jumping toad, because if I had, I knew that they would not believe me anyway. But you and I know well it's true. We know I jumped. We know I flew. We're sure it all took place, although not one of us will ever know. We'll never understand why children go to Wonderland.